is Ralph Rindler, director of the Smithsonian Bicentennial Folklife Festival. If you enjoyed the festival, you'll be interested in this invitation.
Ladies and gentlemen, an opportunity like this cannot be taken for granted.
This evening, we are going to be beating our hearts out for you all, so I want to see people enjoying themselves. So get up and feel the music and do something about it, okay?
This event is a rite of cultural democracy.
We have many, many partners, you included. I encourage you to stand alongside with us as we travel this journey year after year.
Welcome to the 2022 Smithsonian Folklife Festival. For over 50 years, this festival has convened people on the National Mall to explore the power of culture and creativity in our lives today. This year, we feature artists and partners from the United Arab Emirates and Earth Optimism, a global conservation movement. The Smithsonian Folklife Festival is produced by the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage in partnership with the National Park Service. The festival strives to maintain an accessible and inclusive environment for all visitors of all abilities. If you are in need of accessible seating options or assistive listening during this presentation, please see our venue manager volunteer. The Earth Optimism by Folklife sponsoring partners include the Ford Motor Company, HHMI Tangled Bank Studios, Roger W. Sant, and the Honorable Doris Matsui, and United Airlines. Additional support is provided by the Asian Pacific Initiative Pool, Anela Kaole Foundation, Ann Kaiser and Doug Lapp, Rewild, Sakaruna Foundation, and the Shared Earth Foundation. Our festival hours are 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. with special evening functions starting at 6:30 p.m. on the main stage. You can follow our most up-to-date schedule and information on our website, festival.si.edu, or of course, follow us on social media. We also encourage you to visit our festival marketplace and our other UAE and Earth Optimism exhibits along the mall. Now, I would like to introduce you to our session that you're here for today, Food for All, Equity, Access, and Justice. Kate Urbank is our moderator today. She's Site Director, Food Rescue, USDC. Then we have Alexandra Garcia, the Chief Program Officer, World Central Kitchen. Then joining us on screen is Mary Culler, the President, the Ford Motor Company Fund. And then we have Hugo Mogulin, Executive Director of Fresh Farm, and Herb Holden, Chief UDC Center for Nutrition, Diet, and Health.
Welcome, everybody. Again, my name is Kate. I run a food rescue program here in Washington, D.C. Briefly, food rescue is one element of what we're talking about today, which is food access, food justice. And what we do is we use an app to connect opportunities for businesses that have surplus food to donate that food to area nonprofits. In that capacity, I've had the opportunity to work with some of the people here and be part of an amazing network of people who are doing exactly what Earth Optimism wants us to think about: the good stuff, the optimistic stuff, the solutions. And so with that, I would like to turn my attention to Alex Garcia, who's our first speaker, because Alex is, you are all so familiar with World Central Kitchen, and Alex is going to tell us a little bit about how you all decide. I mean, World Central Kitchen is often the very first organization on the ground in a disaster situation or a war situation, as now. Tell us how you make those decisions about where you direct your energies.
Well, you know, sometimes it's a gut feeling, but usually it's in response to a crisis around a natural disaster, or we are very active in the Ukraine right now. We look at what is the food need, what is the access challenges for communities, and you know, can we play a role? Can we actually bring some added value? That's not going to be a yes answer in every situation, so we try to be really smart about are the resources that we have at our disposal something that is going to really help bring food, and more importantly, nutritious food and comforting food to people in crisis.
Terrific. And we're going to go next to Mary, who's joining us remotely. Mary, we know that the Ford Motor Fund supports many food access issues, and one of them is World Central Kitchen. So I'd like to ask you to address how you've helped World Central Kitchen, and then tell us a little bit more about the general funding priorities for Ford Fund.
Hi, Kate, and thanks so much for letting me join virtually, and thanks for hosting the panel. So with World Central Kitchen, as you heard from Alex, they do such an incredible job, especially during disasters. And so we have supported World Central Kitchen not only in Ukraine, but when there are natural disasters here in the U.S. We've supported them in Kentucky when there was a horrible, terrible tornado. And then, of course, also in the Miami-Dade area. And we've supported them not only with obviously funding and support, but with actual vehicles. And so when we think about our role as it relates to food, we really try to think about what our expertise is, and we're mobility experts and technology experts. And so what we have tried to do is to bring that mobility component to food delivery. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we think about technology like autonomous vehicle technology that's coming, some of the software technology around how you can actually deliver food in a more efficient way. And then, of course, just the technologies around electrification and some of the technologies that are coming with some of our products that when you start to think about how they can be used in the field, especially as it relates to food, is going to be a real game changer, I think, in the future. So we're really excited to be a part of this important, essential service, but bringing our expertise to bear.
Thank you, Mary. And Hugo, we're going to speak with you next about Fresh Farm. Those of us in the DMV know that Fresh Farm is a remarkable farmers market that brings people together, 25 markets across the area. And what Fresh Farm really strives to do is work with hyper-local farmers to make sure that we have access to healthy, fresh food. I wanted to know if you could describe some of the programs that Fresh Farm supports in order to enhance that access across many communities.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, so Fresh Farm is uniquely positioned to find some solutions for some of the problems that exacerbate food access. Because food access is a symptom of other more structural issues, right? This investment and some racist policies have created that. But there are some other issues that are present in communities that exacerbate the problem. So how to create affordability, distribution, access to healthy, fresh food when communities cannot have that kind of access. And I'm saying we're uniquely positioned because we have these unique connections with the farmers through our farmers markets and use farmers markets as places of aggregation to create that access to institutions and individuals that have been historically excluded from the local food system.
That's wonderful. And Chef Herb is a nutrition instructor from University of District of Columbia. And among other things, he does food demonstrations at Fresh Farm Markets. And we'll talk about that in a second. But he is engaged teaching 2 to 5-year-olds how important it is to eat healthy, fresh food and bringing that back to their parents and going to senior centers, basically going to where the need is to make sure people understand how to cook food with dense nutrition and how to use some vegetables that might be a little unusual to them. So I wonder if you could take a moment to kind of talk about your work in general.
Yes, we educate all over Washington, D.C. We cover all wards, educating the importance of eating healthy, how to eat healthy. And we primarily work with 2-year-olds because we want to plant seeds early, okay? So, early introduction is the key, I believe, for kids to start off the right way. And not only, with the kids, I do work with adults as well. So, we go out to schools, child development centers, and, we introduce the kids to fresh fruits and vegetables, anything on my plate, proteins. I've kids eating quinoa now because, at the age 2, I introduced them to quinoa. So, the parents, but Chef, what is the world is quinoa? My kid come home hollering quinoa, quinoa, quinoa. So I said, well, I'm glad you asked me. Let me set up a class for you guys and show you what is quinoa. So, we want to plant the seeds now. So as they get older, it won't be foreign to them. So, I've had quinoa because when I was 2, the chef introduced it to us. Or I've had, jicama because chef came to my school and talked to about jicama. So, we also just not talk about it. I get them cooking as well. So I have equipment that 2-year-olds can use, knives, cooking equipment that's safe for them. So, we do a lesson around that particular item. Introduction, preparation, cooking, and we get to taste it as well. So, and before, I am a food carver, so I carve animals out of a lot of this stuff for the kids as well. So this is pretty much how I try to get them to get to the parents, because I made a penguin out of something and they was persistent that you have to buy that eggplant because chef made a penguin, and the parent called me again, chef, come on now. What's up with this penguin and the eggplant? I said, well, I did that so they can bug you to buy it so you can call me so I can show you how to work with it. So that's what we do.
I was actually going to ask you about eggplant because in my food rescue world, oftentimes we deliver fresh eggplant, and people don't really know how to cook it. So I might speak to you later about some recipes I can pass on to them.
I've got you.
Yeah. So we're going to go back to World Central Kitchen. I want to hear a little bit more about. You've served 120 million meals since 2017 when you started with Hurricane Maria. And how do you feed so many people so quickly?
Well, there's a couple of phases in the process, but they go pretty quickly from the time that an event happens, be it a hurricane, an earthquake, or some bombs being launched, to an assessment. So our team goes, we have a couple people who are sort of, ninjas. They go within 24 hours to the location and start scouting for potential kitchens, for potential restaurant partners, for potential food truck partners. Meanwhile, while they're in transit and going there, our home office team is also going through our network of our professional network of chefs that now extends around the world, past partners who may have connections in that place. One person knows another person. And finally, we find with a very short amount of time, community partners and locals with whom to work. So we might take on a couple of different aspects of feeding depending on the situation and what we have found. So one of the methods that we can implement super quickly is working with restaurant partners. So we'll pay local restaurants to serve their community meals. It's wonderful because it helps keep those restaurants open, oftentimes after a hurricane or after a natural disaster, or even during COVID. So many restaurants have to close because their audience, their clients are just not there. So we engage with them, and they are able to serve their communities. We'll do the same with food trucks. Food trucks are incredibly versatile and allowing us to get into places and bring hot, fresh food by local vendors. We did this a lot in Puerto Rico. We had food trucks going all over the island. We served in every municipality. And they would load up in the morning and just go out and feed the communities. And then, of course, we oftentimes set up our own kitchen. So we'll work with a restaurant or a hotel kitchen that has been closed because of the disaster. Or we'll even set up, we have what we call a deployable kitchen unit, the DKU, which is sort of this big balloon, half globe thing. It takes a little longer to set that up. That's usually not for a couple of weeks or maybe a month once we see the need. But we can set up a feeding operation where we're actually cooking within 24 hours in a kitchen that we will rent from a local group that has maybe been disabled. So, because of these local partnerships, because we are working with community partners, and because we have found these really sort of quick, innovative ways of starting to cook and providing food, that's how we reach so quickly. Oftentimes we're feeding within 24 to 36 hours of the emergency having started. It may start with just sandwiches and move on to hot meals, but we're getting food there immediately. And I can't stress enough that really this is about working with the local communities. Our teams, our home team is actually usually fairly small, maybe 5-10 people, and the rest that we do is with locals, local volunteers, local sources, local distributors. We try to buy locally. We try to buy from groups like Fresh Farm, and really keep the food system operating in a time of crisis. And we have found not only is it the best and fastest way to get hot, nutritious, locally relevant, culturally appropriate food in these communities, but it's also an economic engine for recovery in times of disaster, because we're helping these entities stay in business as an alternative way. We're buying food from farms that maybe they've lost all of their business because their clients were schools and restaurants, and those schools are closed, so the food gets reverted to us. And as you know, when we have any surplus, we try to find groups like you to give that to. So we really try to make it a virtuous circle that is built around the resources in the community.
That's wonderful. Yes, we've done some food rescues from really fascinating trainings where Chef Alejandro brings chefs from the region together to be trained over 2 days about how to mobilize a quick emergency situation. One day was making bagged lunches. And it was just fascinating to witness, and we were able to rescue that food off to.
Yeah, great partnership.
And Mary, obviously Ford deals in vehicles and mobilization, and I know that during your work with World Central Kitchen, you've supplied vehicles, and you and I spoke the other day about the oncoming autonomous vehicles that you're working with to consider how to get better food access to places in need. And I wonder if you could tell us about the autonomous vehicle project, when it's launching, it's very exciting.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. And I was thinking about Alex and just the incredible work that they do. And of course, so much of that depends on, sort of vehicles being deployed out there. Ford Transits are a fantastic vehicle, and many of them have been, retrofitted to be pantries and delivery of food. Our F-150 Lightnings have been incredible during disaster relief because, of course, they can power sites and they can help people with food. But the exciting opportunity is about the new technologies coming. And, when we think about autonomous vehicles and driverless vehicles, what we have tried to do in the Detroit area is to pilot some programs that really hone in on helping people who can't get out, who really don't have the ability to get to food, whether it's a grocery store or a food bank. And so the question became, well, how can we help deliver food to them? And so we had a program in Detroit where we were actually testing our driverless vehicles in the Detroit area. And we thought to ourselves, well, they're driving around and getting miles on these vehicles, which we have to do to get certified from a federal perspective. So why shouldn't they do something while they're out driving around? And so we actually, partnered with a couple of nonprofits. One was a senior center in the Detroit area where we delivered 10,000 pounds of food through these autonomous vehicle shuttles that have a fixed route. And then they go through that fixed route. Now, currently they have someone in the vehicle, but at some point they will be able to put anybody in the vehicle. And so when you think about the opportunity as it relates to food delivery, especially in communities where there are food deserts and people don't have the opportunity to get out to get food, it could be a huge game changer. So we're really excited about that project and what it could mean in the future. And we did a very similar project in the Miami-Dade County area as well, partnering with nonprofits to deliver food while we were testing these autonomous vehicles. So more to come.
Great. No, using technology to address food access is tremendous. Speaking of some policy changes, Hugo, you are so committed to food access. What are some obstacles that you can think of that are kind of, how could we clear the way so that there's more opportunities for us to provide food to communities in need?
Well, I think we need to see it systemically, right? Alexa was talking how it's important to keep the food system moving and to address a crisis, but you can see that approach food access in the same way all the time. Actually, there is a crisis of food access. Just recently, there was a report released by the Capital Food Bank where they're telling us that 36% of people in the metro area is food insecure, and African American communities and Hispanic communities are above 50%. So there's actually a crisis, and for Fresh Farm, I think that is how we try to approach the problem, right? We work at different levels, and working at more systemic level, supporting local governments to advance their policies, right? If there's a policy to bring or prioritize seniors or children, how the work we do can support that, and then we move a little further down to see the institutions that actually are working on this problem. So people build community around the institutions where they come. So you can think about churches, food pantries, schools, childcare centers. There's where people come, and we try to meet people where they are. So how we can work with these incredible partners that are already part of the community and support them to incorporate local food in their programming so they could affect change in that way. And then at the individual level, it's important to create agency and provide choice and make it easy for people to access the best possible food. And in the middle of that, as Alexa was mentioning, this is an incredible opportunity to create revenue for farmers. Because sometimes there's this disconnection that, fresh local food doesn't play a part in food access. It actually is a business opportunity for farmers because you are able to create the connection. There is demand, there is a need, and it's important to consider what is the role then that the governments, the local governments, funders, other partners play to connect these farmers with the community. So seeing the problem from this systemic way, I believe is important. You were mentioning Fresh Farm is known for the farmers markets, but we actually are much more than that. It's like we farmers markets are part of our operations because we try to approach these issues systemically and create this circle of wellness that you mentioned permanently in the city.
Wonderful. And we're such a diverse community here in the district and around the globe. It's really important, I've learned in my food rescue work, to make sure that we provide culturally appropriate food to the people that we're serving. And I know the work of World Central Kitchen involves that. You don't come with something that is not palatable to the audience you're speaking to. And so, Chef Holden, I'm wondering, how do you address the diversity of the people that you are instructing? How do you kind of show that you can cook just about anything to their palate?
Well, one thing I do when I go out and do education and demonstrations, I try to cover everything across the board. If I'm in, Ward 7, Ward 8, I will demonstrate something that, maybe in Ward 3, 4, that's in a more, the Hispanic area, it's their fruits and vegetables. So I cross-mingle a lot, okay? I get people outside of the box, I bring things that you normally would not see in your side of town or in your grocery store. And I educate you on that and get you familiar with that. And, most of the time we stick to things we know. We're scared to go outside of that box. Out of our comfort zone is not, I get you out of that box. I bring you towards the things that you've been curious about or you didn't know anything about. And once I give you a lesson and a demonstration and let you taste this, and you'll be like, wow, I've seen this and I never knew what to do with this. Thanks for introducing it to us, So I try to, just cross-mingle, so to speak. Stay away from the broccoli and the tomatoes. I'll go get jicama and, pear pickled cactus leaves, and introduce you to that. So just get you out of that box and just try different cuisines. And I just did a class Monday on trying different cuisines. So we can cross mingle, because a lot of us we're scared to go across that line. No, we can cross that line. I'm gonna help you cross the line. So
Very good. We've been talking about farming. Mary and I also discussed the fact that during COVID, there was some unused land in the Detroit area that Ford turned into farmland in order to kind of provide to the community. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about how you've got people out farming on your land.
I mean, well, if you know Detroit, you know that Detroit actually has an incredible urban farm, very much priority because of all the things that the guests on the stage have been talking about, which is access to healthy and fresh food, especially within proximity, so that they don't have to travel long distances to get it. And so Ford Motor Company, in Dearborn, Michigan, we are one of the largest landowners, and we have a lot of open land. And so as part of an initiative initially to ensure that our employees in the cafeteria and other areas were really getting access also to fresh and healthy food, there was a farming program that was started, and it was quite new, and then unfortunately COVID hit, and there was a lot of fresh produce that was being grown and really nowhere for it to go within the Ford system. And so we quickly mobilized to ensure that the food banks in the area had access to that food. And what was really great about it was, as we discussed, is that it also helped environmentally because this food didn't have to be transported really far. So it really helped on the CO2 emissions aspect as well. But it's a program that we're really proud of because it is about fresh food and fresh farming. And, we have the property and the land, so why not use it for that purpose? So I know that the food banks that received the fresh produce were very much appreciative because at the time it was really becoming an issue logistically to get some of that fresh produce.
Can I jump in on that? And Mary, that's such a wonderful program, and we were talking about policy. If you're looking at things to sort of support, particularly in urban environments, policies at the local level that secure land for local farmers to be able to access. I mean, real estate in urban areas is really expensive. So can there be subsidies? Can there be allocations of public lands for food production at the local level? There's a lot going on with technology in terms of being able to do vertical farms in abandoned buildings if they can be refurbished and repurposed. So for me personally, I think there is a vast untapped potential for food production close to where people are. And that they can do themselves, whether it's backyard gardening or working in a community plot or a family-owned farm in a urban or peri-urban area, or a more sort of commercial vertical farm. There's a huge amount of potential around this, and I know that Hugo is working with farmers who are doing this kind of work, but it's something we all need to be thinking about because it is the way to get around some of the logistics and food supply chain challenges that we saw during COVID. When food has to come from 2,000 miles away, there's a lot of places they can get blocked up. When it comes from 2 miles away, it's a lot easier to get over those challenges. And we really need to be encouraging policymakers to support actions at the local and regional level to create local food hubs.
Yeah, and go ahead, Herb, please.
For UDC, the University District of Columbia, I work under CAUSES, College of Agriculture, Urban Sustainability, and Environmental Sciences. And what we have done, we have put up food hubs in food deserts, in wards 5, 6, 7, and 8 as well. And food deserts are places where there's no local grocery stores around, so folks don't have access to the fresh produce. So we put these hubs up so they can have access to fresh produce, and we don't just put them up. We empower them to grow, to teach them how to grow their foods. We have food truck where, speaking of pre-COVID, and then once COVID started, the food hubs was designed and do exactly what it was designed for during the COVID. We produce a lot of vegetables and we just flood the communities with fresh fruits and vegetables. And I followed the truck along to do demonstrations right on the street to show them this is what we can do with some of these produce, you know, at a nutrient-dense, you know, production. But we want the nutrients to stay at its top. So, you know, like you were just saying, in urban settings, it's hard to garden, so we teach you how to go up, you know. So we do hydroponics and aquaponics systems as well. You know, even we have water resources on causes as well. So we can, you know, show you what's in the water. We can show you what's in the soil and get this ready to teach you how to grow your own foods. And once you grow it, you know, we put up commercial kitchens as well for the community. So now you produce all of these fresh fruits and vegetables, you know, now you need some place to prepare it. So we put in kitchens now that you have access to where, you know, it's not gonna, you know, you don't have to worry about, you know, being a millionaire to rent these kitchens or come into our kitchens. And so we teach you how to prepare, and we do also entrepreneurship as well. So we do, you know, need food handler license. So we try to maximize the whole operation and you know, supply farmers markets as well, and you know, get this stuff to the residents where it's needed.
I believe UDC is the only urban land
Yes.
trust university, which is rare and,
Exactly.
and notable and impressive. Yeah.
Yes, the only land grant university, and we have our largest research farm is out in Beltsville, 168 acres out there, and we do ethnic crops as well. So we grow brown rice right there. We do African crops right there. We do Asian crops as well. So you know, we try to cover, you know, experiment with different crops that, you know, you don't have to import anymore. It's right here, and we teach you how to grow this in your own backyard in a minimum amount of space.
Hugo, please go ahead and talk about urban farming. I mean,
well, I think what Alexa and Chef Herbert mentioned is like how important it is to start thinking on alternatives and to come around these, you know, traditional food system that's like unjust by design, right? It's like you were talking, food's coming from 2,000 miles away, and we've seen during the pandemic how fragile it is, right? Like a little blockage, and then that brings repercussions that keep our shelves empty. And I think we learn to appreciate the value of getting your food from close to you, and how important it is for cities thinking about resiliency, like invest in those more like local food systems. So thinking about alternatives, if you want to create food hubs in the city, real estate is one of the main issues you need to come around. How you do that if you need to compete either to put housing or a food hub, right? It's like the food's gonna try to come always from far. So for Fresh Farm, that's what we've been thinking is like how to create these hubs that are low infrastructure that could help us to have this like decentralized food distribution. And farmers markets are a natural point of food aggregation because the farmers are coming to the cities many times a week, and they want to create that opportunity for themselves. So we take advantage of that trip and we put food in their trucks that would go later to our institutional partners. So coming around and thinking on a decentralized, hyper-local food distribution that needs low infrastructure is important, right? And think how that could improve the food system. And specifically for DC, you can imagine that the city actually doesn't grow this food. And thinking of the city as part of the regional food system is important, because that is where the food is coming from, and how you can invest in these like decentralized operations to keep farmers and business to create opportunities for new farmers. I think all that is connected, thinking innovatively for what is to come.
You notice that throughout this conversation, there's links between us all, and we're just part of the Food Access, Food Justice Hub. It was during COVID, I think, when some of us became a little more connected, and I think that it's a lesson that's going to move us forward, how we can fill each other's gaps, accentuate what the other ones do. And so it's just wonderful to kind of have a conversation where we're all able to kind of share how we all work toward that goal, Earth optimism. Yeah. Is it time for questions?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we are going to ask anyone who has a question to use the microphone. So I'm hoping someone has one. Would you like to ask a question? Would you mind coming over to the mic? Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Not
Closer.
really. Try to.
Closer? Okay.
There we go. There we go.
I was wondering, when you're thinking about food access and policy, what the impacts of climate change may be on food access in the future, and if that's a policy issue that you all are thinking about and trying to plan for and accommodate for, and particularly if all the people that you're serving, if there's an opportunity there to sort of engage them and get them thinking about that issue as well. Thank you.
Alex, do you have a response?
Sure. I mean, climate change is, we've set up a climate disaster fund. We know that the major food crises in the next 20 to 30 years are likely to be related either directly or indirectly to climate change, whether it's because of a drought or whether it's because of a massive hurricane or whether we're talking about migration and refugees, people away from food insecure areas. So we are thinking about it all the time. We have a public policy area that is looking at this. What can we do at the national level? What are issues that we can get behind? But I do think it is incumbent on, this is a government level problem, and it is incumbent on governments to put their citizens first, think about where they're going to be accessing food in 20 years, and start today with creating safe spaces for food production, creating and incentivizing climate safe and sustainable agriculture around the world at the commercial and at the household level. There's a lot of moving parts to this, but absolutely, I don't think anyone who's in the food space is not thinking about it, because we see the impact. We're seeing the impact now. You look at what's happening in Africa, there's a massive drought with a grain shortage that's resulting from Ukraine. It's about to get very, very bad.
Yeah.
Hugo.
Also, I think it's important thing the impact it has on the agricultural sector, because things are less predictable, and crops are just being lost every year, right? We see that with the farmers. There's a time where they have lost all the strawberries because of flooding, or it got warmer earlier, and then suddenly it's freezing, and then they lost all their peaches, and so that not just affects us as consumers, making it harder to access, but affects directly the livelihood of farmers, because farmers understand that they could have a bad season, and they know that it's part of farming. But if the bad season come one after another, after 3 years, they need they're going to be out of the business. So thinking about investing in farmers on how to create resiliency and adaptation, I think that is going to be very important. So we can talk about and we see that more frequently we have these disasters, right? It's like a fire in California, and then somehow that's going to affect what we see in our grocery store. Or there's a hurricane in the Gulf, and it's the same. So shocks are going to keep happening, and probably more frequently. So looking at your very local farming community, I think it's key for governments to start predicting what could happen, how you can keep farmers in business, and how you can help them to diversify their crops in ways that could be meaningful.
Anyone? Was there another question from the audience? Yes, please.
It's a little sunny, sorry. Hi, thank you. This is a great panel. I'm at the local foundation, and I had no understanding of the food equity issues in DC until the pandemic. And one of the schools that we work with said, we have hungry families, and can you help? And over the course of the last 2 years, I really came to understand, this is, Mary, why I'm so interested in your thoughts, that it's not just a food production problem, it's a food distribution problem. And how does one, because we get donations and then basically drive the donations someplace to pack them and then drive the donations from there to the distribution point. How does one really think about distribution? Because there's plenty of food in DC.
There is.
But it isn't in all of the houses. And so how does one think about that distribution question? And then I wanted to ask Hugo or maybe a little bit to talk about schools, because they seem to be a really critical component when we think long-term about solving this issue.
Can I say one thing very quickly, because I think that's a local question in this case, but for us, we consider ourselves a logistics organization. Yeah. It is about logistics. How do we get food? In Puerto Rico, we saw this. Jose wrote a book called We Fed an Island. There was food in Puerto Rico. We were able to feed people, but it's finding it and connecting the food from where it is to who needs it. And I think we find that in every disaster, which is why we're able to procure locally. You just have to be really creative about how you handle those logistics issues. So we actually consider ourselves like a logistics entity. So.
Yeah, I think there's like a way to see that involving the community. And you guys do that, with disasters, and that's how we've been approaching that. As I mentioned at the beginning, meeting people where they are, right? So when people are coming to their schools to pick up their children, then you can take the food with you, or like your childcare centers, your churches. That's one approach, but we also have worked with individuals that would help us to take their food in their cars, like, we call it like Uberizing the distribution. So people from the community that could help us to bring the food around. So understanding how the community could helpful, which also brings this other benefit to create economic development and jobs, right? But it's like thinking strategically the logistics, that's one, and probably the others, like we do these hyper-local distributions, so from the market to the neighborhood, like that, like saving the last mile is the only thing we do, because normally what happens, like if you have food and you drive this big truck into the city, driving it around is a nightmare. So thinking about strategic about the last mile distribution probably is the other way. But involving the community has worked very well for us, and decentralizing it.
One of the things that.
And if I could just chime in here, I mean, I think this is such an important issue, which is why Ford is so interested in the mobility component of it, because it is about logistics, but it's also about, as you know, the last mile. When COVID hit, it was a real wake-up call on a lot of fronts, right? Because it was about how do you get food. And there was food in the food business. They just couldn't get it to anybody. And then the other issue was we couldn't use volunteers, because there were volunteers who weren't able to come out and help, which is also a system that we were used to using. And so we really had to get creative. And at Ford, what we ended up doing is we ended up literally deploying every vehicle we had in our fleet, and even we used services that we had at the time. So we had, actually, interestingly enough, a service called Lincoln Personal Driver, which was a linking service. And these drivers actually raised their hand and said, we want to work, we want to do something. So we actually had them delivering personally food to homes. We have lists and lists of people who could not get out of the house and eat food. But I think it was a huge wake-up call to, just the logistics of how do you get food out. And to someone's point, the last mile, because you don't want to use vehicles that are not environmentally friendly to try to do these logistics, right? And so we have to get creative. And I think that's really exciting for us at Ford to think about what are those mobility solutions and how do we integrate, our electrified products, our sustainable products into the mix so that, we are looking at this in a holistic system.
Jeff, you wanted to add something?
Yes, and as far as the local level as well, distribution is a big thing. One of the things I think is so important is school gardening. across the board, So, our urban ag will come out and start school gardening programs. Our 4-H program does the same thing. So, everybody in each school has a garden. They mass producing tons of fruits and vegetables. We, like I said, we do hydro aquaponics as well. So we know hydro, the turnaround time for lettuces is like every 4 to 5 weeks. So, that's a good start right there. So the kids are learning how to garden. Now you're producing. Parents come in and everybody has a package of vegetables, each week, each month, what have you, to go home and eat healthy, especially, with the economic crisis that's going on right now. So this is the best, to me, that is one of the best starts that I think we need to do is get school gardening programs across the board,
And Food Rescue US actually rescues surplus food from certainly the fresh farm markets. We glean 5 of the markets, and we actually do some schools when they have surplus food. So we make sure that we're able to get that last mile transport from wherever there's surplus vegetables and keeping them fresh. We go directly there. There's no warehousing, so it's just another example of how we all cooperate. I think we're coming to our time. I don't know if somebody wants to say one last good news story. Is there something optimistic under the Earth Optimism banner? You look like you want to say something.
Well, I think we are talking about this like green problem, but also like working in food gives you the opportunity to see the joy and how we actually connect across food. And just it's so interesting to see like the ways that we approach this problem, how the organizations that are caring about that, and institutions, funders. So I always am optimistic of how people can bring all these wonders around food. Yeah.
Support your local farmers. Anyway, so that is our panel for today. It's lovely to have had this audience and the live stream as well. And thank you to the Smithsonian Folklife Center and Earth Optimism for the opportunity to talk about our work.
And thank you, Kate. Great job moderating. We really appreciate you. Let's give a round of applause to Kate and our panelists. Thank you so much. And also just a big thank you to our technical crew and our volunteers. I really appreciate everybody. Okay, so I'm sure our panelists, if you have additional questions when they leave the stage, which you guys can do at any time, I'm sure they would be happy to take questions and answers if you have additional ones for them. As we make way for our next panel, which will be a UAE presented panel at 2 o'clock in 15 minutes, I also want to remind you that at 3 p.m. we have another Earth Optimism panel coming up. It's called Tech Breakthroughs for Animals and Communities, and it will feature CBS correspondent Rita Braver and Smithsonian ecologist Jared Starbucks. So definitely recommend that you be back here at 3 to hear that. It's going to be great. And then as you exit, please remember to visit the other Earth Optimism and UAE exhibits along the mall here, and make sure to visit our marketplace, which is on the other side of the Smithsonian Castle. There you can support artisans from all over the world. All right, so that's it. Thank you so much for joining us.